Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we've got another new release. It's a very strange trend for my channel. If you've been following me for a while now, you know that my heart, my soul, the things that I love in perfume are usually vintage stuff. The 80s is my favorite decade, but you know, I love stuff from the 50s, 60s, 70s, early 1900s like Mouchoir de Monsieur, late 1800s like Jicky. I like everything except for modern fragrances. Modern fragrances, for the most part, are very boring to me. That's why when you look at my modern fragrance shelf, you'll notice there's a lot of niche that tries to do different things. There's a lot of Amouage from the old days. I was a huge Amouage fanboy. If you look, there's Portrayal, there's Dia, there's a bunch of different ones up here. There is Interlude and Interlude Black Iris. Myths is right here. So long story short is I own just about every release that was done by the House of Amouage under the leadership and creative developer Christopher Chong. He was, I think he was one of the best creative directors ever. And so this new guy has big shoes to fill. And I've been very harsh on the House of Amouage because I don't like the direction that they're going. And you know what? He kind of came out on one of the videos and said, well, guess what? If the current people don't like it, so what? There's new people that will replace them. And if that's their, take on it, well, it's almost like so long, sayonara kind of thing. But I still want to give the house a chance, since it is one of my favorite houses of all time. There's a new release called Opus 14, and it's Royal Tobacco. That's what they're calling it. It's created by Cecile Zarokian, and I got this decant from Moudesir, who I really trust. You can look him up on Base Notes. I put his name in comments and even titles of my last big unboxing, Enchante and Moudesir unboxing. You can find him on Base Notes. He is extremely trustworthy. He's one of the few people in the industry that I will give somebody his name and contact information and say, go at it. You're in good hands kind of thing. So I bought this instead of a full bottle because Amouage as a house has kind of lost my trust over the years. And especially with the new creative director, I think the best days of Amouage are in the past, unfortunately. That's my take on it. But I'm still always open to giving fragrances a fair shake, okay? And if you've watched, I've done some new reviews recently. I recently did reviews on Ganymede, which just came out a couple years ago. Yesterday, I reviewed the new Guerlain Oud Cole, which is absolute shite, in my opinion. It smells like an oud version of Abbey Rouge Dress Code, not Abbey Rouge Dress Code, the flanker, which is discontinued now. It has that sweet praline note in there, like sweet, vanilla with oud. Sweet praline, frosting thing with oud. It does start to turn smoky, but long story short is I dissed it in the video yesterday. I didn't like it. My fragrance BFF across the pond, Rich Mitch, he did a video today on Frederic Mall's new Uncut Gem, and he really bashed that. Actually, he might have bashed that worse than any fragrance I've ever seen him bash. He said it was the worst thing he smelled in 5 years. He said it basically smelled like generic white musks that Francis Kirkjohn uses mixed with Nautica Voyage. Ouch. And also in Sauvage's Ambroxan. Ouch. Really big slap in the face to Frederic Mall if that's true. So we've been very harsh on modern releases, and to be honest, most of it is probably warranted, okay? These houses have done it to themselves. But this is a good fragrance. I will tell you that right now. I am enjoying this. I have sprayed it a couple times now. Many people have asked me my routine. What do I do in the morning? So when I spray, I'll usually hit the side of my neck, right here. And then I'll do my left hand to begin with, to start the day. Then 2, 3, 4 hours in, I'll hit my right hand. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to continue to smell the dry down without interrupting the process on my left hand, but also re-experience the open. So it's after lunch here in Texas. And so I've been wearing this for most of the day. And this is my initial impressions. Now, keep in mind, this is an initial impression. Okay, so take that with a grain of salt. But I did take some notes, and but I want to read you the story first. So this is Royal Tobacco, Opus 14, the library collection, which is supposed to be like the artistic sense, if you will. You know, they're supposed to be the more daring, artistic sense. That was the whole point of the library collection, the Opus collection. And so Royal Tobacco says on the Amouage website, Ode to Smoke. By the way, 100 mils, 360 US dollars. And it says, as the 23rd parallel north unites the sun-drenched shores of Cuba and Oman, basically the new creative director of Oman noticed that the Cuba and Oman sit on the same parallel. Opus 14 Royal Tobacco weaves as one of their iconic treasures royal frankincense and tobacco absolute, hence bearing the name Royal Tobacco. Both fumigated since the earliest days of recorded history, their vertical signature imprints the entire evolution of the perfume, each enriched with supporting notes that reveal and sublime their complex personalities. Aromatic flashes of cardamom and elemi light up the voluptuous heart, shining with many facets and flowers and balsams, casting their reflections upon the frankincense and tobacco duo. Emboldened by benzoin, labdanum, and myrrh, ambery notes of vanilla, absolute, and tonka bean eschew the coumarinic depth of fenugreek, while graceful volutes of prunal, Bulgarian rose, and osmanthus absolute evoke the fruitiness and floralcy of high-end cigars. Supported by anise and basil, the typical treacly burnt molasses note of licorice acts as a link with the choral finale of smoky birch tar. Vetiver and Gaiac wood, amped up by the glaring animality of oud. Opus 14 Royal Tobacco is daring, lavish, deep, and modern creation fit for men and women alike. Okay, so there you have it, created by Cecile Zarokian, who all of a sudden, her and Renee Salman must really have a connection because she's been doing a lot of stuff for the house all of a sudden since he became the new creative director. And this is, let me go through the notes so you have an idea of the scent. So it is kind of spicy and smoky. That's an easy way to describe it. It begins with frankincense oil, elemi resin. So it begins almost oily. Think about the oil. If you've ever smelled this, Vert d'Encens, green incense by the House of Tom Ford, they don't smell alike, but they have that same oily feel, okay? The texture. And this goes on the skin very oily. And so does Royal Tobacco. It begins very oily and smoky, okay? The first time that I smelled it, well, I'll get into that. Let's finish the notes and then we'll get into it. So cardamom is in the top, along with aniseed, anise, which is a big note in vintage masculines. I was going to see if I had Azzaro Pour Homme up there, but I think I put it away. But if you've smelled many vintage masculines, there's a lot of old school fragrances that use that anise note. And even some of the new stuff, Lolita Lempica Au Masculin is one that comes to mind. This is a beautiful take on anise. And there's a bunch of them. A bunch of old masculines that use the anise note. And the first time I smelled this, I didn't get it. The second time, I did get the anise note. With basil bergamot, that's the top. The heart is tobacco absolute, licorice root, very interesting. That's probably one of my favorite notes in this fragrance, by the way. The licorice root here really sets the fragrance apart, and it gives it something a little unique. Although there is another fragrance that uses licorice, I'll show you here in a little bit that it did kind of remind me of a bit. Lavender, prunal, fenugreek, orange blossom, osmanthus, and rose. That's the heart. And those florals are not prominent. They're not in-your-face floral. This is not a floral composition, but I think they're there, as the brief said, to basically give you, sometimes when you smell tobacco, when you smell a good cigar, a high-end cigar, where you can really pick out notes, you can pick out charcoaly notes from the soil or floral notes. Sometimes tobacco will smell floral. And tobacco, for those of you that don't know, tobacco actually, while it's growing, has flowers. And those white flowers do have a smell. And so if you're standing in a field of not dried and cured tobacco that's hung from the ceiling and allowing to dry, but fresh tobacco, you will get a floral nuance. And so I think they use the orange blossom and osmanthus to try to highlight the floral facets of tobacco. And then a base of frankincense, which stays true to the Amouage, DNA. Peru balsam, benzoin, labdanum, myrrh, birch tar, which is usually smoky, tonka bean, bourbon vanilla, which is one of the higher end versions of, vanilla, designer vanilla. That's not super sweet, which I'm glad they use that. Vetiver, gaiac wood, Assam oud, and musk. Okay, so let me tell you what people told me. Let me tell you what I was hearing before I smelled this. So the first thing that I will tell you is that one of the people in my circle who I really trust bashed this fragrance. Did not like it. Said that it was a cheap copy and it wasn't worth it. That's one person. A second person who I really trust told me that it's very similar to, this, which is Amouage Boundless. Now, what's interesting about Boundless is that it was created by Karine Vincent-Spanner, another, perfumer who did work for Amouage in the past. She made stuff like Memoir Man, Overture Man, Fate Man, and so she's been around the Amouage block. She worked with Christopher Chong a lot. And Cecile Zarokian, who did Royal Tobacco, did Epic Woman for Amouage. So she also then, but that was before Renee Salmon took over. Once the new creative director took over, she did stuff like Material, which was the women's release that was supposed to go with this, because they used to do a men and a woman. He came in and ended all that, which I did not like. I liked the men and the women release of the same fragrance. So they released Boundless from basically in the men's bottle and Material in the women's bottle is what they did. And so Cecile Zarokian has now made a lot of Amouages. She also made this one, which is Silver Oud. I'll do a video on this tomorrow because I'm interested in what this is. But that's for tomorrow. That's for tomorrow's video. So today, for Royal Tobacco, someone that I really trust basically told me, hey, you don't need this if you already have this, okay? And I will tell you that I don't feel like that's necessarily true, which I'm glad, because I was starting to get really worried if that is true, like what the hell is Amouage doing? I will say, though, that before Renée Salmon took over, there was really only one Amouage tobacco fragrance that I could really think of that really highlighted tobacco, and it was this. It was Journeyman, which has made an appearance very often on my channel all of a sudden. I love this stuff in the cold. It's smoky and spicy. Beautiful pepper, Sichuan pepper with tobacco, the freshness of juniper, and one of the best cypriol notes in perfumery. The only fragrance that I would say has a better cypriol note than this is Promise by Frederic Malle. So tobacco is a note that wasn't necessarily an Amouage staple, you could say. If there was tobacco in other, Amouage releases, they're not coming to mind right now. Just off the top of my head, this was under Christopher Chong. This is under the new creative director. And now he's doing another tobacco scent, Royal Tobacco. So all of a sudden, he's really implementing tobacco into the Amouage repertoire, if you will. And so what's it like? Is it like Boundless? No, it's not. Boundless starts off much more spicy. It has this blood orange, cardamom, and ginger. It does still have elemi resin in the top. It does use bourbon vanilla. It does use gaiac wood. It does use tobacco absolute. It does use frankincense and myrrh and vetiver. So you can see there's a lot of notes, but they're packaged differently, if that makes sense. They're packaged in a way where it doesn't seem redundant to me to have both. This focuses more on the spice and amber woods. This is a big amber woods fragrance, which was kind of disappointing. That's where it really let me down. And in fact, even on the brief that Corinne Vincent-Spanner wrote, it says, when I created Boundless, I wanted to play with the idea of golden wood, basically amber woods. And I like this fragrance, okay? But I don't love it. It wasn't what I expected out of Amouage, and I really started to get down on the house after this. And some of the other stuff they released didn't feel like an Amouage to me. Enclave and Meander, all that, those don't feel like Amouages. That's just my opinion. Someone came in, left a comment and said, well, Christopher Chong created stuff for Amouage that wasn't like the house was creating before. And so I understand both sides of the argument. But for me, it doesn't feel like these are Amouages. Even this is probably, you know, this probably has much more of a connection with the heritage and DNA of the House of Amouage than Boundless does, in my opinion, okay? My personal opinion. And so the notes are very similar, you'll notice, but they're, the way that they're all put together and the way that they smell is different. Boundless focuses on the spices, let's say. Royal Tobacco really focuses on the tobacco. And so what it starts off with is an emphasis on tobacco. I mean, it literally smells like you are smelling wet and dry tobacco at the same time, which is beautiful. And if you know me, tobacco is a very easy sell for me. You know, tobacco and leather are easy sells for me. I love tobacco and leather. They're two of my favorite notes. And then you add in frankincense and resins and all that good stuff, and I'm usually very hooked. And I wore this before looking at the note breakdown. So before I looked at this note breakdown, I wore it. I like to do that because I like to see if I pick something up that's not listed, and I did. I thought at first I smelled cacao, and you know what? There is cacao in Boundless. There is Cacao Absolute. And so when I very first smelled this, for the first 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes, I went, oh God. You know, the guy, and I don't want to say any names, but the guy who was saying it's like Boundless is right. This is cacao, tobacco, and the cacao started smelling very sweet. And I went, oh God, no, not another modern failure. Because, you know, one of my fatal flaws, if you will, for modern perfumery is that sweetness. The sweetness is a big error. I mean, it's like a flashing error in my mind when I get that sweetness, like it's going down the wrong path. But it did a course correction extremely quickly. And when I reapplied it, I didn't get the cacao, okay? And I didn't even get as much smoke. So the very first time I sprayed it on, it literally smelled like somebody took a cigar and just blew the smoke on my hand. You know, and the smoke just hits your hand and just kind of floats in the air, right? That's the tobacco feeling, wet and dry with smoke. And I really enjoyed the opening, but once that cacao started to come in and the sweetness, I was like, oh no. But the second time I wore it, I didn't get the cacao feeling, because there's no cacao in here. I didn't get the smoke. I didn't get the tobacco right off the base either. What I got was the resins and the elemi and the frankincense oil, and it smelled much more oily. It smelled much more like Vert d'Encens did to me on round 2. I got a lot more of the frankincense oil, and I got a lot more of the anise. The anise really came through on the second wear. And I got more basil. Okay, let me just do a fresh spray here, just so I can experience the top again while we're talking about it. Okay, and as it turns out, that cacao note was not cacao at all. But what it was is licorice, and I'm getting it right now. Right as I sprayed it, I got the licorice root. And the licorice root reminds me of a fragrance, one of my favorite hidden gem fragrances no one talks about. Luca Turin loved this fragrance too. It's this. It is the original from the late 90s Yoji Om. This uses a beautiful licorice note, probably the best. Royal Tobacco by Amouage is the only fragrance I've ever smelled that can compete on head-to-head beautiful licorice note with this. Now, this causes a little bit of a problem because since that licorice note is one of my favorite parts of this fragrance, and I already have Yoji Om from 1999. If you get the reformulated version they did in the 2000s, you're going to hate this fragrance. It's a terrible reformulation. You have to get the 1999 version. It's very hard to make sure you're getting the right version. If you see one that says Jean Patou on the bottom, that's a good one. You can also find Procter & Gamble versions of this before they then discontinued it a year or two after they purchased the House of Jean Patou. But be careful with buying Yoji Om. Make sure you're getting the right one. And Yoji Om also has anise. It also has lavender, okay? It also has tonka, and it has many of the notes that, you know, will remind you. Maybe there's not. Oh yeah, there is tonka in Royal Tobacco. But Yoji Om goes in a different direction. It goes with that licorice, and then it adds more gourmand notes like coffee and leather and rum and stuff like that. Opus 14, Royal Tobacco, goes in a different direction. So the licorice root in both is beautiful, but then they go different paths, okay? And the Opus 14 Royal Tobacco really starts, so right now what I'm getting is a lot of green. There's a lot of green notes coming through, which is beautiful. I mean, it smells like you're standing in a fresh tobacco field, you know, because there's a little bit of that floral essence. There's a little bit of greenness coming through. Basil, fenugreek are the two big green notes that come through. And then some of the spices, you know, are there, cardamom and anise. But it's the green notes mixed with that licorice and tobacco, very prominent tobacco opening when I first smelled it, and then very oily. This time, again, I'm getting the oily frankincense oil and elemi resin. I'm getting that over the other facets. So it's very interesting, and that sweetness is very toned down. I was worried for the first 30 seconds or a minute the first time I smelled it, because the cacao really started to feel like it was pushing ahead, pushing itself forward, and cacao can be sweet if it isn't properly used. I was worried, and as it turns out, it's not too sweet. This fragrance is perfect for someone like me who doesn't necessarily want big sweetness. It's more focused on the resins, the tobacco, the green touches, which are now really coming through, and then as it dries, you get more and more of the oud and stuff like myrrh, Peru balsam, birch tar, which makes it feel more smoky. It literally feels like you're going from the beginning of a cigar created in one of those cigar creating factories in Cuba or Dominican Republic, and you're smelling the person starting from picking the tobacco on the field, which I know is impossible to do because it has to dry and cure, but it smells like you're going from fresh tobacco fields to the factory, to the being rolled, to the being smoked. And it's a beautiful fragrance. I mean, I really am enjoying this. I'm glad, because if I had another terrible experience with a new fragrance, I don't know what I would do. You know, just because it's getting to be it's getting to be really soul crushing trying these new fragrances and being disappointed over and over and over. So, couple things. Number one is what people compare this to. So on Parfumo, this is the #1 fragrance it's compared to. And this is a new fragrance in my collection. It was sent to me very kindly by one of you. I bought a fragrance from someone and they said, hey, I've got this. I don't wear it. Listening to what your tastes are, I think you would love it. And they sent it to me. Very kind. again, some of the people in this community are outstanding. So it's Beaufort's Iron Duke. And Iron Duke came out in 2017. Julie Dunkley is the perfumer. And this uses tobacco and oud. But the difference is that it goes into some extremely strange territory, and it mixes insane notes all together, and I love that. That's what I used to love about Amouage, like Mitzman, some of the things that Chong did, which were more challenging. You know, that's part of the reason I loved Amouage. And with Iron Duke, it takes that tobacco oud thing that Royal Tobacco does. But Royal Tobacco, for me, is much more wearable. Like, I would easily wear this to the office, no problems, right? Iron Duke, I would have to really think about it. The other interesting piece, and the reason I think it's compared, is that this has star anise basically, which is also tobacco, oud, anise, a very similar combination in Royal Tobacco. But Iron Duke adds liquor, metallic notes, and hay and leather. And there's a big dose of castoreum in here, I think. They don't tell you which animalic notes they are. It just says animalic notes. But it smells like it's castoreum. It smells like you're smelling castoreum. And instead of smoke, instead of birch tar like smoke, you know, that's what gives the smoke note in Aventus, is that birch. And there's no birch tar in Iron Duke. There's charred wood, so it smells much more like something's been burned and then washed clean with soap, with castoreum. So it has that dirty, clean, you know, it has that dirty, clean, you know, it's like a diversification of notes. It's like you're smelling both sides. That juxtaposition is the word I was looking for. And this is much more daring and something that I actually enjoy this more. I wore this to bed. I was really taken with this. I really, really like this. So buying a bottle of Royal Tobacco is going to be a very hard sell for me. You know, unless I can find a bottle for a couple $100, I probably wouldn't go for it. Just because of the fact that, and on top of it, there's so many tobacco fragrances in my collection that I love because tobacco's an easy sell. I'm looking forward to wearing this, Tabaroa Millésime. I think this is a fantastic tobacco fragrance that doesn't get any love. Tabaroa Millésime is like fresh. It's like a fresh Creed, you know, with ginger and that normal Creed DNA, but with tobacco. And this is one of those tobacco fragrances you could wear in the heat. You know, if you wanted to wear it in the Texas heat, like where I'm at, this is what I'd recommend. But some of the ones I've been really waiting for to wear once it gets cold, Tabac Vert. This is a beautiful tobacco. One of my favorites, honestly. One of my absolute favorites. Tobacco with tons of oak moss. The oak moss makes it feel green. You know, it's really textured, underground, earthy oak moss with woods. So it's like tobacco, woods, and a little bit of amber and musk and stuff like that. But the oak moss in here is just one of the best oak moss notes I've smelled in modern perfumery. And then finally, of course, just real quick to highlight Boss Number 1. I mean, this is my favorite, one of my favorite masculines of all time. This also uses basil, that green tobacco, green notes with tobacco. But here, they really use honey to round everything out. I love the use of honey. Honey is one of my favorite notes. It's spicy, it's woody, it's just honey-drenched masculinity. This is one of my favorite tobaccos I'm looking forward to wear. So, since I got the decan, I was able to do a video on it. Would I buy this? No, I don't think I would. But I'm not here to bash it, okay? It's a good release. In fact, it might be the best thing I've smelled since Christopher, or what's his name, Renaud Salmon took over, since Christopher Chong left. Royal Tobacco is probably the best thing I've smelled from the house. So I am slightly enthusiastic about maybe their next release, But man, they're releasing stuff left and right. And, you know, for me, since I have all of these Amouages, if I was going to buy another Amouage right now, there's a hole in my Amouage collection. There's one Christopher Chong fragrance that he did in the main collection that I missed. And it's Figment Man. And that one's that earthy, animalic fragrance. It smells like, you know, geranium and dirt. And it's a tough one. And I skipped it originally, but I think I would enjoy it much more now. Something like that, if I can get an older bottle for 120 bucks or something, I'd much rather go for that than 360 new for this. So it's all a risk return trade-off. It's all of where you're going to spend your dollars. If dollars were unlimited for me, sure, I'd just go buy this. Who cares? But since I have to really prioritize where I spend my money, I think that this will be a pass, although I have to give it a thumbs up. This is a good fragrance. And if you are a tobacco fan, I would really urge you to sample this. I think this is good stuff. This is more the type of release that I expected from Amouage, much more than this. You know, this I'm very disappointed with. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Cheers, and I will hopefully see you again tomorrow with another video. If you have any experience with Royal Tobacco, the House of Amouage, do let me know. I look forward to talking with you again tomorrow. Do another video on another Amouage early impression, Silver Oud. That's my plan anyways. And I will look forward to seeing your faces in the comments. Thank you to everyone who subscribes and likes the videos and all that good stuff. I really do appreciate it. I know you don't have to do that. So cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye now.